All right. So welcome to our free prep hour for July 26, 2020. My name is Scott Miller, and I am going to be your instructor tonight. Just a few things to let people know as we get started. A couple kind of housekeeping public service announcements that we like to share. So first of all, we do these free prep hours a couple times a month. You can join us live, like some people are tonight. We have some people here tonight who are joining us in Zoom for our free prep hour. Also, we record these and put them up on YouTube, put the recordings up on YouTube. So if you are joining us on YouTube and you want to join one of these free prep hours live, you go to our website and you can sign up. So in addition to these free prep hours that we do a couple times a month, we also have some other good free options, some free LSAT prep resources on our website. And what I'm going to do is, if you're here joining us live tonight in person, at the end of our session tonight in our chat window here in Zoom, I'm going to put a link to some of our, some useful pages on our website, including some of these free resources. And I see a question in the chat window about being on video. So I'm the only person who's going to appear on the video right now. I mentioned this a couple moments ago, but for those who are participating with us tonight, if you type something in the chat window, that won't appear in the video. I might read, some things that people put in the chat window, but the chat itself won't appear in the video. Q&A won't appear in the video. If you choose to get on the microphone, if I ask you to get on the mic and you choose to get on the microphone, you will be recorded. Your voice will be on the YouTube video, but that's it. If you don't want your voice to be on the video, you don't want to appear in the video, then you don't have to get on the microphone. So yeah, I'm gonna, in the chat window tonight, for those who are here live, I'm going to put some links in the chat window to some free resources on our website. If you are joining us on YouTube, look in the description for the video and you'll find some links to some free resources on our website. So tonight, we're talking about strengthen and weaken. And if you were here for our last free prep hour earlier this month in July 2020, this is going to be kind of a continuation of that because we were talking about the same thing last time, strengthen and weaken questions in LR. We're going to use questions from Prep Test 65. And this is, it was really actually an interesting conversation last time. We had some really good conversation and some good participation from people analyzing some strength and weaken questions. So we're just going to keep going with that. And look at a couple other interesting questions that we didn't get to last time. And as you may know, when we talk about logical reasoning in general, but especially strengthen and weaken questions, these are questions that involve arguments. So if you are really just very new to the LSAT and not super familiar with logical reasoning, you're going to want to learn about arguments anyway. You're going to want to learn as much as you can about arguments on the LSAT and what they are and how they work. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about arguments because we do have other free prep hour recordings on YouTube. So if you need introduction to arguments, you need some basic information about what arguments are and how they work on the LSAT, then check out some of our other, and again, I'll put a link to our YouTube channel in the chat window at the end. If you're watching this on YouTube, then you've already been to our LSAT YouTube channel probably. But yeah, so if you want to review arguments and just the general basics of what an argument is and how they work on the LSAT, we have a couple really good videos on that on our YouTube channel. Just kind of briefly talk about what an argument is. So an argument on the LSAT has two parts. An argument on the LSAT consists of a premise or some kind of evidence that's used to support a conclusion. Those are the two basic parts of an argument. Any argument that you see on the LSAT is going to include at least one premise and a conclusion. So the conclusion is like the main point of the argument. We can say that the whole purpose of an argument is to convince you that the conclusion is true. The conclusion is some type of claim, some type of maybe opinion or claim that someone is making. May or may not be true. We don't know if the conclusion is true. The whole point of an argument is that the premise, whatever evidence they give you, is supposed to convince you that the conclusion is true. So another way to think about this is sometimes we can say that the premise is like the evidence that you would present at a trial, and the conclusion is like the verdict that you want the jury to reach. It's a kind of a quick explanation of what an argument is. So what we're going to do with that just quick explanation, and if you're, again, really new with arguments and new to the LSAT and still learning what an argument is, you'll see some examples here as we look at some of these LR questions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a question up on the screen here, and I'm going to give everybody like a minute and a half to work on this question. And go ahead and when you are ready, if you come up with an answer that you think is correct, go ahead and put the answer in the chat window. And I've changed the chat so that you can only chat to me. So we won't spoil each other's opinions. So go ahead and work on this question. I'll give you a minute and a half. If you think you have a correct answer, or believe you have the correct answer, put your answer in the chat window. Here it is. Okay, that was about a minute and a half, a little bit over a minute and a half. Go ahead and put your answer in the chat window. Even if you're not sure what the answer is, go ahead and put your answer in the chat window. Okay. So, let's see. How about Sunny? Sunny, you can give me a yes or no in the chat window. Would you like to hop on the microphone and talk to me about this question and how you approached it and how you arrived at your answer? And then if you don't want to get on the mic, that's totally fine. And if you do, I'll give you permission to talk in a moment. Just let me know in the chat window, Sunny, if you'd like to get on the mic and talk about how you approach the question. Give me a yes or no in the chat. Okay, awesome. Give me one moment, Sunny. Okay, you should see a little talk button in the lower left corner of the screen. You might have to hover your mouse over the bottom of the screen. Yeah, there you are. Cool, Sunny. Thank you so much.
Yes.
All right, can you talk to me about how you approached this question? Talk to me about the process that you followed to answer the question.
Well, I definitely applied more of like an elimination perspective, and some of the bottom answers, C, D, and E, for me were not on the mark. So there was a little bit.
When you say not on the mark, what do you mean by not on the mark?
Okay, so when I'm looking at it, I thought that the premise was where it says its sole purpose of copyright was to encourage the circulation of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I was kind of looking for this idea of circulation in relation to copyright. Mm-hmm. And that's, I mean, I don't really have any kind of brilliant analogy other than that in terms of what I was looking for in the answer.
Okay. What type of question is this? How would you describe like what we're being asked to do here, the job that we're being asked to do in this question?
we're definitely trying to strengthen the argument.
Strengthen, yeah. Conclusion of the argument is most strongly supported. So we call this a strengthen question. We know that there's an argument and we are trying to strengthen the argument. So this is, it's you know, you may hear people say, and there's actually even a little bit of a debate about this, like, should I read the question stem first? And this is the question stem, by the way, this little part where they're asking us the question. And I say always read the question stem first, because different LR questions are going to ask you to do different things. And you want to be really clear about what your job is before you do anything else, because not every question involves an argument, right? Some do and some don't. So we want to be clear about that this is a question that involves an argument. We're being asked to strengthen the argument. So we need to go and understand what the argument is. Now, you mentioned the premise. So is that all we care about up here in this paragraph, is just the premise, that premise that I highlighted that you mentioned, or is there anything else in there that's important?
Well, no, I mean, so that was the beginning part. And then we're also looking for what you were saying earlier is for the conclusion.
Yeah. What's the conclusion?
The conclusion. Okay, I'm guessing now. I'm just going to be transparent.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Guesses are great.
Okay. Well, I'm going back and forth. Where is the conclusion that authors are trying to get financial rewards, or that copyright goes beyond its original purpose? I think that's where I also, as I'm trying to go through these questions fast, I think that's sometimes my hang up as well, is just trying to figure out those two parts and then figure it out in the answer.
Okay. So I'm going to put it to the group in the chat window. Let me know, do we have any specific words or phrases in this paragraph here that help us understand, like, what is the conclusion of the argument? Okay, we have a vote from Harry for copyright goes beyond the original purpose. Janae says, however. Okay. So, however is important. However doesn't actually tell us what the conclusion is, though. However is a pivot word, okay? So when we see however in an argument, so I'll give you an example. Let's say I say something like, I'll just make up something here. So I don't like to eat apples. However, I want to make an apple pie. Therefore, I must buy some apples. Okay, so this is an argument. We have what we call an opposing point here first. I don't like to eat apples. Some people call that background information, but notice our conclusion, therefore I must buy some apples, kind of goes against that, contradicts it a little bit. There's a little bit of tension there, contradiction between the two. So what the word however does on the LSAT, when you see it in logical reasoning, it's a pivot word. It means we're pivoting to the core of the argument, what we call the argument core. The argument core consists of the conclusion and the premise or premises. So, and I could actually rewrite this and say, however, I must buy some apples because I want to make an apple pie. So notice that I could put the premise or the conclusion after however. Again, I could rewrite this as, however, I must buy some apples because I want to make an apple pie. And it's still the same argument. Premise is I want to make an apple pie. Conclusion is I must buy some apples. But we can pivot those, we can switch those back and forth after however. So the whole point here is however is important, but what a lot of people think is that however is a conclusion indicator. It points, whatever follows conclusion, however is the conclusion. That's not always the case. So what's actually, it is useful, but what's also useful here is sense, the word sense. Sense means because. Here's why, right? Here's my explanation for my conclusion. So sense following this phrase copyright sometimes goes beyond its original purpose is telling me that this is my conclusion. Copyright sometimes goes beyond its original purpose. Why? Because sense sometimes blank. So Sonny, you want to hop back on the mic?
Yeah, am I still there?
Yeah. So what do we just talked about that's helpful here for you?
Well, I definitely am going to remember that. However, is not always. Sometimes those indicator words too are tricky, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you assume that it's the conclusion. But I appreciate that you said sense.
So we have some premises here, right? So the sole purpose of copyright was, or some information, we could maybe call this a premise. The sole purpose of copyright was to encourage the circulation of ideas by giving authors the opportunity to derive a reasonable financial reward from their works. However, pivot, copyright sometimes goes beyond its original purpose. We could kind of look at that first, we could look at that first statement that you talked about as a premise, or just explaining what the original purpose was. And then our conclusion is that copyright sometimes goes beyond its original purpose. But that word sense is really important, because sense almost always, I won't say always because the LSAT can throw us some curveballs, but sense almost always points to a premise. Whatever follows sense on the LSAT is frequently, if not always, going to be a premise. So that tells us that the blank that we're trying to fill in this particular case is going to be a premise.
Okay.
Supporting the conclusion. So what I want you to do, a couple takeaways from this, Sonny. One is make sure to answer these questions correctly and to have any basis for eliminating wrong answers, you have to understand what the argument core is. You have to understand the actual argument. You got to be crystal clear about what the conclusion is and clearly understand what the premises are that they're giving us, if any, right? And put some effort into that. A lot of people try to just get like a general idea of what the argument is about, and they don't get us this specific, this granular about, like being able to point to the conclusion and point to the premises. Once you do, then it's going to make your work a lot easier when you get to the answer choices. So the LSAT rewards upfront work. The LSAT rewards us from, you mentioned trying to go fast, and everybody's always trying to go fast on the LSAT, but really your success comes from knowing when you can go fast and when you need to slow down in order to work accurately. So we understand what the argument is. The conclusion is copyright sometimes goes beyond its original purpose. What's the original purpose? Well, the purpose was to give authors the opportunity to derive a reasonable financial reward from their works. Mm. Why? So why does copyright sometimes go beyond the original purpose? Well, the correct answer should tell us that. The correct answer is going to be the premise that tells us why copyright sometimes goes beyond the original purpose. The correct answer is going to support that conclusion. So, Sonny, with all this being said, do you have any ideas about the answer choices now?
Yeah, I'm just like not one to be put on the spot right now.
Oh, you're doing great. That's totally fine. And by the way, if I pick on somebody and you're confused about things, that's the most interesting conversation we can have, because probably whatever's giving you trouble is giving a lot of people trouble who are watching this and who are here tonight. And by talking about it,
strength and weakening is one of my hardest ones, as everybody can see, but that's why I tuned in tonight, because I'm always just like, what it seems like it should be straightforward, but then as we just saw, I get confused with the different ways that things are structured.
Yeah. So, well, let's land the plane here. Let's take this home. And Harry, I will say, I see what you put in the chat window. I like what you're saying in the chat window. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Publication of copyrighted works is not the only way to circulate ideas. Does that support our conclusion that copyright sometimes goes beyond the original purpose?
No.
Yeah. What does it do? What does that do to the argument? What does that?
I mean, it works against it, right?
Yeah, publication of copyrighted works is not the only way to, it's not talking about going beyond the original purpose. It might say that, maybe the original purpose isn't super effective, right? Mm-hmm. But, and, you know, some people are saying it's kind of weak in it, kind of going against the argument. Publication of copyrighted works is not the only way to circulate ideas. So there are other ways there are other ways. It kind of goes against the original idea of the purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like calling into question the purpose. It calls into question the purpose for copyright, but it doesn't relate to going beyond that original purpose, right? So that's not doing it for us. Same thing with B, right? So B is kind of maybe calling this original purpose into question. Like, why do we care? Why do authors care about copyright if they're willing to circulate their works even without any financial reward? So what about C, Sunny? So you're doing a good job with this. What about C?
Authors are unable to find a publisher for their copyrighted works. Copyright go. Yeah, I just really am not sure right now. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Do you want to get off the mic?
Yeah, I think so.
Somebody else? All right. Sonny, you've done a really good job with this. I want you to think about your takeaways from this. And the big takeaway that I'm going to suggest is invest some time in really, before you go to the answer choices, invest some time in understanding what the argument is. You know, you want to be crystal clear about what the conclusion of the argument is. Otherwise, you're going to have a hard time understanding and you know, any premises or other important information we're given. Otherwise, you're kind of shooting in the dark when you look at the answer choices. And you end up, maybe some answer choices appear appealing, some don't, but you're not always 100% sure why. Like, this is what we get down to, right? We're not really sure about these answer choices and why they're right or why they're wrong. The more clear you are about the argument itself, the more clear you'll be about the answer choices.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sunny. Thanks for your help. Okay, by the way, get 1,000 points. The points I give away in class are not good for anything, so I give them away very generously. Sunny, you just got 1,000 points. Okay, authors are unable to find publishers for their copyrighted work. Again, maybe that kind of goes against, because the purpose was to encourage the circulation by giving authors the opportunity to derive a financial reward. But again, does C support the idea that copyright sometimes goes beyond that? No, this again kind of tells us maybe that, you know, copywriting isn't a great idea in the first place. Like, maybe it's a lot of these answer choices, what they're doing is having us question whether the sole purpose, the original purpose is even, you know, is even worthwhile in the first place. No practical way to enforce copyrights. Then we get to E, copyrights hold for many years after an author's death. So notice now we're getting into an idea of something doing more than it was intended to, going beyond the original purpose. What's the original purpose? The original purpose is to encourage the circulation of ideas by giving authors the opportunity to derive a reasonable financial reward. So the original purpose was to benefit authors, and through that benefiting the circulation of ideas. E is the one that helps us see or supports the idea that copyright may do more than it was intended to do, excessive beyond what it was intended to do, because, you know, we're going beyond when the author dies. Okay, so takeaways here. Again, we always want to understand what the question's asking. This is a strengthened question. It's asking us to support the argument. And when we talk about arguments and support, it says the conclusion of the argument is most strongly supported, but really we want to understand the whole argument. You know, in this case, we're kind of missing the premise here, right? We're missing the support. The support is entirely missing. So what we're looking for to fill the blank in with is we're looking to fill the blank in with a statement, a premise that would support this conclusion. And support this conclusion, not support something that just very generally goes against copyright or against the idea of that original purpose, but specifically supports the conclusion that it's going beyond its original purpose. E is the one that does that. E is the correct answer. We want to understand what the question's asking, understand the argument. What actually is the argument that we're being given here, and recognize that this argument is actually lacking a premise. So we need to supply the premise. That's what the correct answer is going to do. All right. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Sunny, you did a great job with this. Anybody else? And again, this is a really common thing that I see people do is some people, you know, because we're in a hurry, are really reluctant to take the time to learn how to identify clearly what the conclusion of an argument is, identify clearly what premises, if any, are in there. And without that, you know, the questions become really, the answer choices themselves become really hard to manage. You're going to be very tempted by trap answers that are actually incorrect, that don't do what the question actually asks. And you're going to have a harder time spotting a correct answer as appealing, as one that we should be interested in. All right, let's keep going. So we'll do another question, same thing. Go ahead and do this. I'll give everybody a minute and a half. Again, if you would, please put your answer in the chat window when you have a correct answer, and then we will talk about it. Okay. Give everybody about another 10 seconds, and then I want everybody to put an answer in the chat window. Even if it's a guess, go ahead and put your answer in the chat window. All right. Carolyn, do you want to get on the microphone? Give me a yes in the chat window if you want to get on the mic and talk about this question. Give me a no if you'd rather stay in the chat window. Carolyn, do you want to hop on the mic? And all right, awesome. Another brave volunteer. You get 1,000 points just for hopping on the mic tonight, by the way. Again, the points I give away are not good for anything, so we give them away very generously. But Carolyn, you just won 1,000 points. You want to hop on the mic? Say hello. Let me make sure your mic's working. Give us a hello.
Can you hear me?
Perfectly. Yes. Thank you, Carolyn. Okay. So help me out with this question. What is this question asking us to do? What's our goal, our task here?
Basically to strengthen the argument.
Yeah. Argument is most strongly supported if which one of the following. Yeah. So we're being asked to strengthen. It's an interesting question stem because it mentions assuming, which there are questions that specifically ask us for assumptions, but notice what the assumption has to do. All the assumption has to do in this question is support the argument. So we're not worried about, necessary assumption, sufficient assumption. There are certain types of assumption questions on the LSAT that ask us to do very specific things. But in this case, all our assumption has to do is support the argument. So it's a strengthen question. We're just being asked to strengthen. All right, so what's our next step, Carolyn? What are we going to do next?
Well, I basically just read the question first and try to understand it.
Okay.
It says physicists claim that their system of careful peer review prevents scientific fraud in physics effectively. And then they compare it to like how biologists thought the same thing, and they turned out to be wrong. Since then, biologists have greatly enhanced their discipline safeguards against scientific fraud, which prevented major incidents. So then they're basically asking, I guess that physicists could make the same progress if they were to do the same thing. If they were to.
What is that? So here's a little more specific question. So you're reading this paragraph and you're getting an understanding of what it's saying, but it's asking us about the conclusion of the scientist's argument. So what is the conclusion of the argument?
That it would be conducive to progress in physics if physicists were to do the same thing.
Yeah, so that's the question we always want to ask ourselves is like, what is the conclusion and then what is the support for that? Getting an understanding, I mean, of course you want to get an understanding of the concepts and what they're saying, but really what we're most interested in is which one of those statements is the conclusion. And then what's the support? Do we have any support for that? Do we have any premises? Why should we believe that it would be conducive to progress in physics if physicists would do the same thing?
Oh, because biologists have greatly enhanced their discipline safeguards against scientific fraud, which prevented further major incidents.
Okay. Anything else in there? What about those previous sentences, the earlier sentences? Do they help support the conclusion at all?
I think so, simply because they're basically saying that physicists had basically made similar claims that biologists made 20 years ago, and with that same claim, biologists were wrong, and they did something to prevent that happening again.
Yeah, like those first few sentences, first couple sentences actually tell us how this relates to physics at all. Because notice if we just included that last sentence, since then biologists have greatly enhanced their discipline safeguards. Okay, it would be conducive in progress to physics if physicists did the same thing. Why do physicists have to do anything? What does this sentence have to do with physicists? So really, these previous sentences, some people might look at those and say, well, they're just background information. But actually, this does tell us what this whole thing has to do with physicists. Why do we care about the physicists? Oh, because they say, hey, our careful peer review prevents fraud. Well, great, but biologists claim the same thing and they were wrong.
Right.
Okay, so do you see anything wrong with this argument, Carolyn? And this is what we always want to do. We want to be crystal clear about what is the conclusion of the argument, and then what is the support? What support, if any, is given? But it's saying we have to strengthen the argument, support the argument. So why does the argument have to be supported? Well, like, what's wrong with this argument? Why is it not perfect the way it is? Any ideas?
Well, I guess because they're just assuming that because it worked for biologists, it would work for physicists as well. I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe there's a difference between biology and physics. Some difference that would make whatever works for physicists not work for biologists. So that's always good. And that step that we just did. So the first thing that we were doing here, clearly identifying the argument core, the conclusion and the premises, that first step is like super important. You have to do that in order to be able to get any traction on the answers at all. That second thing that we just did, where I asked you, if you notice anything wrong with the argument, is really useful too. Maybe it will help you. I don't even want to say predict an answer, because a lot of times you won't. I mean, what you pointed out, Carolyn, is maybe a problem with the argument. It may not be the exact problem that the answer choice addresses, but it's always good to pause for a second and try to get an idea of, do you notice, is there anything wrong with the argument? Do you notice anything wrong? Because that often can help you with the answer choices. So let's talk about answer choice A, Carolyn. What do you think of answer choice A?
Major incidents. I don't think that actually can like strengthen the argument at all, major, because
What does it do for the argument?
is it weaken it?
How does it weaken it?
It's just I just don't think I just think it's just basically saying a major incident. It just doesn't
Now
really
here,
help with progress in any way. I don't really think it has anything to do with like supporting what they're trying to prove.
okay. So here's an interesting thing we can do with answer choices is just try to relate each thing in the answer choice to our argument. So if you really want to prove whether it's right or wrong, this is a good way to do it. So do we talk about major incidents of scientific fraud anywhere? Do we talk about that anywhere in the argument up above?
They only talk about like peer review prevents scientific fraud, but they don't really say.
Okay, prevent scientific fraud. Well, where else do we talk about scientific fraud? Keep scanning through the argument and see where else do we talk about scientific fraud.
That biologists they enhance their safeguards against scientific fraud
Yeah.
to further prevent major incidents.
So the biologists are enhancing their discipline safeguards against the fraud, preventing further major incidents in fraud.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we are talking about major incidents of scientific fraud. We are talking about that in the premises. So it is relevant, at least to the premises. Where do we talk about progress?
In the conclusion, it would be conducive to progress in physics if physicists were to do the same thing.
Yeah, and so here's an interesting thing to notice. Progress in physics. Do any of the premises talk about progress in physics?
No, they're talking about progress in biology.
Where do we talk about progress in biology?
Enhancer. Oh wait, no. They did not. They just said, I mean, isn't it basically going to assume that?
Yeah.
Because they improved their disciplines to prevent further rage, so that is progress.
So you said the right thing. And Carol, I'm going to ask you to put your mic off for a second.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's no problem. The only reason I'm asking you, Carolyn, is because we're getting a little feedback. We're getting a little audio feedback. There's an echo in my voice when I'm talking. It's just coming through your computer. So not your fault, but the solution is to turn the mic off for a second. So you just hit the nail on the head. There is an assumption in this argument conducive to progress. I mean, it sounds like all these premises are about progress, but the premises never actually talk about progress in the discipline. They're talking about preventing fraud, experiencing fraud or preventing fraud. So it's really important to notice when a conclusion introduces a new idea. And they're going to be sneaky about this because they're going to introduce these new ideas that seem totally related to the ideas in the premises. But when a conclusion introduces a new idea that isn't discussed in the premises, we have to ask ourselves, well, what's the connection between the premises and the conclusion? And they haven't explicitly made that connection. They haven't explicitly told us how preventing further major incidents of fraud would be conducive to progress. Like, they haven't explicitly said it. And the whole thing about arguments on the LSAT is arguments are very formal. Arguments are supposed to give you every piece of information that you need to draw the conclusion. So if I say like, all dogs are mammals, therefore Jessica's pet is a mammal. Like, you might read that and think it makes total sense, right? But there's an assumption in here. The assumption is that Jessica's pet is a dog. It was never explicitly said. This is a terrible argument. In LSAT terms, or in logic terms, this is a broken argument. This is not a convincing argument, because the argument should explicitly tell us that Jessica's pet is a dog. An argument is supposed to give you all the information you need to get from the premises to the conclusion. So there's a gap in this argument between preventing major incidents of scientific fraud and progress in a discipline. Maybe fraud really has, like, it's a bad thing. Yeah, we don't want fraud, but maybe fraud doesn't really prevent progress in physics. We don't know that, right? And keep in mind, we're not worried about real world knowledge here. LSAT, other than, you know, things that are considered general knowledge, like you're supposed to understand that, you know, physics is a scientific discipline and that biology is a scientific discipline, right? That's like considered general knowledge for somebody taking a graduate level admission test like the LSAT. But we don't know whether preventing incidents of fraud is conducive to progress or not. Like, who knows? So there's definitely a gap there between preventing major incidents of fraud and conducive to progress. And so notice what A does. A says major incidents of fraud in a scientific discipline are deleterious, right? Harmful to progress. So if major scientific instances of fraud, if major incidents of fraud are harmful to progress, well, that means that maybe preventing further fraud would be conducive to progress, that it would help. Right? So A does strengthen the argument. A helps. Now, B, a lot of people pick B, or several people pick B. And the reason that B is a problem, let's look at it. Very few incidents of even minor scientific fraud have occurred in biology over the last 20 years. So it kind of sounds like it helps things, right? Some people are calling it a premise booster. I mean, I guess you could kind of call it a premise booster, but it says biologists have greatly enhanced the discipline against scientific fraud, preventing further major incidents. The premises actually say that they've prevented further major incidents. So if an answer choice said something like, there have been no incidents of, if an answer choice said there have been no major incidents of scientific fraud in biology over the last 20 years, that would be a true premise booster, because it's just adding to something that we were already told. The thing that actually makes answer choice B appealing is it seems to be adding more to the argument, saying, hey, there haven't even been incidents of minor scientific fraud. They're doing such a good job, there haven't even been minor incidents. It is a little bit different from what the actual premise is telling us. But the reason it's not the correct answer, or the reason it doesn't do as much to strengthen them, I'm going to put it that way, is because the reason A is a better answer is because A strengthens the link between the premise and the conclusion. And this is one of the most important things that you want to understand about the LSAT, is that it's not just about adding more information or helpful information to the premises. We could do that, maybe, but we're always more interested in something that strengthens the link between the premises and the conclusion. I don't think B is a bad answer at all. I think B does strengthen. It's adding one more piece of information to the premises that make the existing premises even more convincing, but it's not helping us strengthen the link between premise and conclusion, which is what A does. So keep that in mind. That's a big takeaway from this question, is we always prefer answers in strengthen and weaken questions. We always prefer answers that strengthen the link between premise and conclusion, not just that add more information to the premises. That's not necessarily what we're looking to do. So A does that. Carolyn, do you have any questions about this, Carolyn? Difference between A and B? Okay, excellent. Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you for your help. You get 1,000 points. Again, really common in these strengthen and weaken questions. They're going to give you answer choices, you know, and this is a little bit of a tougher version. This is a question 22. This is not going to be the easiest question on the test, but they are going to give you, in some tougher questions, they may give you more than one answer choice that looks appealing. So often what you have to do to make your final decision between two answers is say, which answer choice does more to strengthen? It even says it up here. The conclusion of the scientist's argument is most strongly supported. It doesn't say, pick the only answer that supports, right? It says, which one of the following does the most to support? So we be ready on these strengthen and weaken questions to see more than one answer choice that's appealing. And we're looking for the one that does the most. and part of that is recognizing the link between the premise and the conclusion that we're looking to fill. So try to notice answer choice, or try to notice when there are new ideas in the conclusion. Try to notice that when there's something in the conclusion that's going to be related to what's in the premises, but not exactly the same. All right. Let's see. I see some questions in the Q&A window. Okay, and I think somebody was asking about B, and so we covered that. Somebody had a question about answer choice B. Let me know if I did not completely answer your question about answer choice B, but I think we covered that. Let's see what else we can do. We have a few more minutes left. Let's see what else we can do with these. Okay, let's do this one. I'm going to show you guys another question. And same thing, I'll give you about a minute and a half to work on it, and put your answer in the chat window when you have it, please. All right, that was about a minute and a half. So give everybody another 10 seconds or so to put your answers in the chat window, even if you're not sure. What do you think the answer is? All right. Okay, we have a little bit of a variety here in the answers. So here's why I picked this question to show you, because it's a bit of a trick maybe, but I'd rather trick you now than have the test writers trick you on test day. So notice that if you looked really quickly at the question stem here, it might seem like the same type of question we're working on. It talks about most strongly supporting something, right? But notice what the question actually asks. The statements above, if true, most strongly support which of the following. So this is the opposite of what we were doing before. Before, in the previous two questions, we were being asked for the conclusion is most strongly supported if which one of the following is assumed. So notice this question stem is saying that one of the following, one of the answer choices is going to support the argument above. So this is a strong question. The correct answer strengthens up, strengthens the argument. Another similar wording, but completely different question is what we have here. In this question, we're saying the statements above, these statements support the answer choice. So this is a question, we call this an inference question. There's not an argument. We're not necessarily looking for an argument up here. And this is one of the reasons why we want to read the question stem first and actually read it, read what it says. Sometimes people get into trouble because they read the question stem too quickly and they don't actually recognize what we're being asked to do and what type of question this is. So the statements, the stimulus is just giving us a bunch of statements. In fact, we could almost say a really good way to think about inference questions is that these are all premises. These are all, we treat them all as premises, and one or more of these premises together will support one of the answer choices. You could almost think of the answer choice as the conclusion, right? It's a good way to look at these. So again, be really clear about, make sure you actually read these question stems. Read the question stem first and actually read it. Make sure you know what the question is about. Give me a yes in the chat window. Let's have people be honest. Give me a yes in the chat window if you were confused and you thought this was the same type of question that we've been looking at earlier. Yeah, a couple people saying yes. Yeah, people do this all the time. So yeah, not rare at all. So again, you see the takeaway, you see the lesson here. Make sure you actually read that question stem and know what your task is. Okay, so the way we're going to approach this, and I know we're getting towards the end of our free prep hour here, so I'm just going to go through this quickly to help people out. So we read all this information. Birds and mammals can be infected with West Nile virus only through mosquito bites. Mosquitoes become infected with the virus when they bite certain infected birds or mammals. Virus was originally detected. And so, some of these statements up here could possibly be written out as conditional statements. I'm not going to get too far into conditional logic in the last 3 minutes of the free prep hour. But if you recognize that some of those, like only through, only when, only if, that's kind of a conditional logic indicator. So I would at least be aware, even if I didn't diagram this out, I'd at least be aware that there could be some conditional logic here. So they're telling us, where the virus originated, how it spread. Humans sometimes catch West Nile virus, but they can never infect a mosquito. Mosquitoes can infect us. We can't infect mosquitoes. Okay. So we're going to do most of our work on this question. Again, it's not like the previous questions where we need to identify the argument. There may or may not be an argument up here. The question stem is not telling us that there is an argument. So we're not going to go looking for an argument or a conclusion or reasoning. We're just going to understand the statements that we're given, and we're going to do most of our work when we get to the answer choices. So answer choice A, some people like answer choice A. West Nile virus will never become a common disease among humans. So where up here do we talk about how common West Nile virus is among humans? So we know birds and mammals, well, we're mammals, can be infected with West Nile virus through mosquito bites, okay? Mosquitoes become infected when they bite insects or mammals. Virus is originally detected, humans sometimes. So notice, nothing up here really tells us how common West Nile virus is or how common it will become. It says that humans, can't infect mosquitoes, but maybe other things can. Maybe, cows and cats and dogs. So we don't really have enough evidence up here to support the idea that it will never be a common disease among humans. So we're going to get rid of A. West Nile virus is most common in those parts of North America with the highest density of mosquitoes. Again, where do we have information about what parts of North America, in what parts of North America is the virus most common? All we know is that it spread to North America in the 1990s. We don't know anything about how common it is in different parts. So what we're doing as we look at these answer choices is kind of like try to figure out the main topic, the main subject of the answer choice. What is the central topic of this answer choice? And is that even discussed in the paragraph above? And very often we can get rid of answer choices quickly because whatever the main topic, the main subject of that answer choice is, whatever that is, was never even talked about or not talked about in a way that supports that answer choice. Some people who become infected with West Nile virus never show symptoms of illness. Again, do we talk about showing symptoms? No, we're not talking about showing symptoms. We don't have any support up here to know who shows symptoms or who doesn't. West Nile virus infects more people in Northern Africa than it does in North America. Okay, so again, a virus was originally detected in Northern Africa, spread to North America in the 1990s. Again, I can see why people would pick D because you're thinking, oh, it started there first, right? Or it was detected there first and then spread to North America. So you might think, oh, so there are, fewer people infected in North America, but we don't know that. Maybe in North America, I mean, you ever been to Florida? You know how many mosquitoes we have? You've been to North Carolina, where I live? You've been to my backyard? You know how many mosquitoes there are out there? So maybe the West Nile virus mosquitoes are very, very happy in the US and going around and spreading it all over the place. Whereas in Africa, yeah, the mosquitoes aren't as happy. I don't know, right? So we don't really know where more people are infected. We don't have any evidence about that up there. Be careful not to read too much into statements like that one sentence. The virus was originally detected in Northern Africa, spread to North America in the 90s. That doesn't, or sorry, the 1990s. It doesn't tell us how many people. So with a question like this, we're looking for the answer choice that's most strongly supported by the information up here. And we have to be really careful about adding too many pieces of information ourselves to what we're given. We're really going to try to stick very closely to the information we're given and see how that information, how does each answer choice compare to the information that we're actually given? Be very, very careful about adding in your own pieces of information or your own ideas. So we're left with E. West Nile virus was not carried to North America by an infected person. Well, we know that it spread to North America in the 90s. What would have happened if it was carried to North America by an infected person? Well, those people never are able to infect a mosquito, so it's not going to spread. That infected person has the West Nile virus, but they're not going to spread it to other people. So it must have been coming from something else, from a mosquito itself or from some other bird or mammal that was infected, that spread it to North America. We do know it spread to North America. So E is our correct answer. We have support based on that last sentence, especially on the last sentence. We have support for the idea that it wasn't carried to North America by an infected person. It must have come from a mosquito that took the flight over, or from a bird or a mammal that carried the virus and then infected the mosquitoes. All right, so we're getting to the end of our session. E here is our correct answer for 9. What again, I'm going to strongly recommend is think about your takeaways. Think about what we discussed here in these different questions that is different from what you're doing now, different from the way that you're approaching these questions yourself now. And what can you change? What can you practice that will help you, as you're doing your whatever LSAT practice you're doing here in the week coming up? What do you want to look at and practice that will help you answer questions more accurately? It's not just about working fast, it's about working efficiently and accurately. So think about anything that we talked about tonight that you found helpful, that you found useful, and that you want to practice when you're looking at these strengthen and weaken, and in the case of this last one, inference questions during your practice this week. I'm going to put again, for those of you who are joining us on YouTube, you can look in the description for the video. We have some links to our free resources. You can try out one of our LSAT classes if you want to. Our normal LSAT classes in our 10-session complete course are 3 hours long. So not just a single hour, but 3 hours. We cover either 2 or 3 of the sections. You can attend session 1 of any of our courses for free. So if this free prep hour was helpful and you want to come to one of our actual class sessions, session 1 of our actual complete courses, you can sign up, you can attend for free. If you decide to join the full course, that's fantastic. If you don't, that's okay too. And so check that out. Check out the other free resources that we have on our website. I'm going to put, again, if you're watching on YouTube, you can find these in the description for the video. If you're here with us tonight, I just added some comments to the chat window about some free resources that you can take a look at. And that's all I got for you folks. Thanks for the people who are watching on YouTube. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and say good night.